Close. Chip Popiviciu?
Yes.
Close enough?
Very good. Yes.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
All right, so good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with you and to get to know the organization. Also, thank you for the opportunity to moderate this panel. I'm not exactly sure how this works, so I'm going to muddle my way through it. So we have several entrepreneurs here that are, have international origins, and the point of the conversation is to see the value that international entrepreneurs provide to the community and to our in general triangle area, and learn a little bit more about their experiences and learn a little bit more about how they came about in this area, how they started their own business, and where they see things going. So I'll just tell you a little bit about myself, because probably I'm not going to say much more after that. I'm going to have my partners in the panel talk more. So I moved here in '97. I'm originally from Romania. That really doesn't say much. I'm from Transylvania. That's much more exciting. And this is the real Transylvania, so not a county in Western North Carolina. And so I came here for grad school. I studied physics. I have a doctorate in physics. That went by the wayside when Cisco hired me. So I worked for Cisco for about 15 years, various roles. And then a few years later, I decided to try entrepreneurship. And it's painful, but it's also very interesting and fun. One of the most rewarding parts of entrepreneurship, I think, is that you really tap into a very good community. People try to help each other. People try to figure things out. Michael is always there wherever you go, so he always helps out. So that's what I think it's very interesting. And just one last small detail. So this is my 10-year anniversary. I summited Mount Everest in 2008. I did that together with a school here in North Carolina, which I think it was a fantastic experience. And that ties into education, which I'm a big supporter of. So I'm going to invite the other panelists, please. Mark and there, and yep. Sit on the edge. So I can look at the
Sorry. It's gone very quiet.
So do we really need to use the microphone, or can you hear us?
That is a question for you.
Robert? Testing, testing, testing. 1, 2, 3.
I can hear you, but the microphone will make the audio much better.
Okay, all right.
Pass the mic, please.
All right, so first off, what we're going to do is I'm just going to do a quick roundtable. Everybody introduces themselves, and then start a conversation.
Sure.
Yes? Oh, and we need to turn it on. How about now?
Yeah. Oh, much better.
Thank you, Chip. So, Sudhir Deshpande. I'm originally from India. I came into US in '93 and actually landed in RTP. And I was here for almost 14, 15 years. I worked at I started with IBM here. I was at IBM, Cisco, and in between, at MCI, Fujitsu, and also I was at State Administrative of the Courts, and where Richard was. And Cisco moved me to California, or I moved with Cisco to California. And just a few months ago, I have come back, although my wife had come back here a little sooner than that with the family. Family always loved North Carolina, so we came back. And so I started a company in machine learning, and So trying to go here now, back.
I'm usually the short guy with the weird name in the world. So my name is Swanand Mokashi. And there's a quiz after, so tell me my name properly afterwards. But anyway, I landed in the USA in 1997, and I did my master's at Oklahoma State. So I came from a fairly big city in India, and then moved to Oklahoma State, which is Stillwater, about 80 miles away from Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City in itself is a pretty small town, and Stillwater is further 80 miles, I believe, south of it. And my first impression was a culture shock in a different direction as to whether I made the right decision to come to this country, because I was not used to, seeing on the left-hand side and right-hand side and seeing everything till the horizon. There was nothing in there at all. Walmart was the biggest thing in there. And then after that, after I did my master's, I worked in Atlanta for several years, and that made sense. That, okay, I made a right decision. Anyway, I moved to RTP in 2005 and love it over here. I started my business in 2007, so we went past the 10th anniversary recently. We do mostly Microsoft and related technologies, so we are a service provider to our clients. And our business model is to help out the clients who do not have any IT infrastructure of their own, and help them grow their business so they can help me grow mine. So that's the philosophy.
Evening, everyone. My name is Tully. I'm from England, and I think my story is somewhat different in terms of how I got here. I'm a relative new arrival, moved to Raleigh, North Carolina around about 12 months ago. In actual fact, I've been kind of transitioning here from other parts of the world over the last 2 years. And reflecting on being prepared to talk tonight, I realized that I was always destined to move to the United States. My corporate career of 2 decades was with an American multinational. That was my first job. I then, completely independent of that, met and married my wife, who's American, and I'm passionate about Harley-Davidson motorcycles. So I was destined always to move here, but I've been a small business owner and I guess you could say entrepreneur for the last 15 years. I set up a consultancy and sales and leadership competency service and practice in Dubai, in the Middle East, where I've been living and working for around about the last 10 years. And what brought me here from a business sense, I kind of followed my wife here anyway, but what brought me here from a business sense is, and it's something that is a philosophy of mine about small businesses and entrepreneurship, and it's about unintended consequences. And I always take a view, sorry if I'm kind of gliding into a discussion point in a sense, but if you do the right things for your clients, if you focus on your clients and do the right things continually, then in small businesses, there's so many opportunities that become apparent as a consequence of what you do. So what actually brought me here from a business point of view is trying to do the right things for my clients in that particular region required some technologies that weren't available, and I had to go out and search and invest and find those technologies. One of those technologies is from the UK, one of them is from Germany, and the unintended consequence is that opened up the opportunity for me to bring those products to market here in the United States. We're actually at a startup stage here, and that's why I'm here, and I'm here tonight to share hopefully some experiences.
So a long way from the mic. Right, so I prepared a couple of questions. Already some topics have been somewhat touched. But I would like to start with one thing in particular. I think that we are entrepreneurs at heart, or we're trying to get there, some of us, like me. And in a certain way that matches a certain ethos that we have here in the United States. And I think that's, at one level or another, what's attractive and what makes us make US or the channel at home. But what makes us start the business here? It just happens in the right place and our family is here? Or there's more to it? I'm sure we have different experiences, but I'm curious to understand that.
Certainly. The way I look at it is that when I I grew up in a really small village in India, and for education, I came to cities in India and got into computers. And with computers, I felt that yes, I have to be in US if I want to do anything more substantial. And back in the early 90s, there was not the companies that you can now associate with were still much smaller. And if you want to do any significant development, you would come to US. Simultaneously, there was a Bill Gates and like Steve Jobs were the icons that we would look up to, kind of thing, in the sense that wow, they started companies and now look at what they have been doing. And so always wanted to do something on my own. I had started back in 2001 time frame. I had started a services company here in RTP, and did that for a couple of years. I had a partner, and he passed away. And then after that, he was handling all the sales and things like that. I was still handling the technology side, and so somehow that didn't continue afterwards. So again, I went back into the corporate culture, and then but always wanted to do something on my own as such. I think you want to kind of take some ideas that you have. This place gives you the freedom to start something very quickly, very easily. If I want to do the same thing back in India at those times, it would have been almost very, very difficult. I think the kind of the culture is very, very suited to giving multiple chances to people, trusting them with what they have to say. I think the way you can relate to people and easily make some value suggestions and build on those things, people are a lot more open to it. And again, I can only speak about probably for India and here in terms of doing such a entrepreneurial leap. But that in India, yes, you need to have really good connections, which you don't need to do here. I mean, I think you can build connections here. That is I think something that I felt was just the way how this country is built, or this way this community is built up. And so that I felt is very, very willing to let you take chances, willing to take your dream and see where it takes you.
Well, my family background is a little bit different from what you explained just now, but my dad has been a serial entrepreneur, so back in India, and he owned several businesses, and most of them did very well. So that background was with me all the time, even when I came over here. He was not happy when I came here because he wanted somebody to take care of his business, and he didn't want to do that. So, so when I started, one of the things that struck me while I was here working for corporate was, while you are doing stuff, I was in the IT department of larger firms, smaller firms, and one thing I noticed very drastically was, though people were very good at wanting to do work, there were so many things that were coming in the way that IT departments were looked upon as the no people. And I wanted to change that a little bit, why would anybody say no to anything? So when I didn't get, I saw that I had a great opportunity doing that on my own. So decided to go the other route, and let's give the small business, medium business opportunities to have the same quality of work that larger companies have, while saying yes for them. And the beauty of this country is, once you have a vision, once you start putting your efforts in it, there's no end to that. I mean, I started my company in 2007. It was the height of recession, and I started it at that time. And soon enough, I realized if I can make it happen in these years, then when the times are good, it's gonna be awesome. And the other thing, why USA? Like I told, my dad had multiple businesses in there. So when I told my dad I've started a company, so he was under this assumption, being from India, that it's gonna take me about 3 or 6 months to actually start the company, because I have to do some kind of paperwork and all that. And I told him that I did that this morning, and that was the difference. So that helps, because you need that momentum when you're starting your company. And if it takes you 6 months just to start the company, it takes your momentum away. So that's very different about here. So those were the things that it's so easy to do business in the USA, even when you have a different background or you're not from here, so to say. But people are very welcoming, and it's very, very easy to start a company. So whoever I meet, I always tell them, go do it. There's nothing stopping you. People say that 50% of small businesses collapse after 5 years, but look at it the other way, 50% survive after 5 years too. So let's be that 50%, and it's not too hard. Just that the environment is very fertile for us to make that happen.
I think, first of all, my motivation to step out of the corporate world and set up my own company was a motivation of being self-employed enabled me to spend more time doing the things I really love doing. So I love watching people grow, get better at their jobs, perform better, advance in terms of their skills, their competencies, their confidence. And I was a people person in a company where I had to spend most of my time doing other things, getting things sold and marketing and everything that goes with big business. So my passion is people. I'm a very people-centric person, so that's what, in the first instance, made me make a step into my own organisation, or setting up my own organisation. The point about why am I here, I also wanted, being self-employed and entrepreneurial enables me to take a blank piece of paper and design things and create ideas and solutions and identify where there are problems, whether problems in an organisation, in an industry, in a market, and how can I solve those problems. So to give you an example of what motivates me and what I'm trying to do, I attended in February of this year a conference here in Raleigh that was hosted by the North Carolina Workforce Development Council, and they published a research, maybe some of you have seen it, they've done a wide-scale research last year interviewing 1,500 corporates and companies here in North Carolina, looking at the skills gap. And they presented information on several different verticals that all had one common denominator. Every one of them, their top 5 skill shortages, and you may well relate to this in your own businesses, were soft skills. So part of what attracted me to come here and the product that I'm bringing to market is if we can solve, not on its own, but I can be part of a solution that solves this very significant skills gap that we are facing in this country and many other countries as well. And that's what gets me up in the morning, and that's what drives me in terms of helping to solve people issues, you might say, and people opportunities. To a point that I think both my colleagues here have mentioned, I do have experience of setting up businesses in other parts of the world, and I really relate to what you said in terms of you can have so much enthusiasm and energy, but the bureaucracy and the time that it can take to register a company and open bank accounts and stuff like that just takes so long. It takes so much energy. So coming here, there's 2 observations. It's very easy to do business. It's very easy to set up and be up and running very, very quickly. But the environment here also is extremely open to welcome new people, new ideas. There are people in this room who've been a tremendous help to me. And when I meet complete strangers for the first time over a coffee, very common, the first thing people say is, how can I help? And I'm used to working in parts of the world where you don't get that. Don't underestimate how open doing business here is and how supportive the overall environment is for in my experience as a startup in ITP.
Okay, so obviously we all sync and sort of synchronize with this fertile environment that US offers and the community offers and the culture offers. In that context, as you say, to a certain extent, we are maybe sometimes in a better position to appreciate some of these qualities as newcomers that other people might take for granted. At the same time, I think what's also important to recognize is that we each one contribute to the overall value of the community, both to the entrepreneurship but also in terms of society and in terms of economics. So what I would like to also learn a little bit about is, in your own individual experiences, what part of your background, of your history, you feel has an impact on your business and on the local community?
Do you want to do this
Start
way?
start over?
Yeah.
That doesn't give you
It's
time to
always
make
going to
up an
go this
answer,
way.
you know? Can you repeat the question? Okay, a couple of things I would say about that. I think my testimony, in a sense, I guess is something that's about me and what drives me and what I'm seeking to pursue is I'm a high school dropout. I left school at 16 in the UK with no qualifications, and by my mid-30s I'm in a pretty senior position in a large American multinational. My first work experience was signing up for what's called in the UK the dole, which is unemployment benefit. So it was 1978, 79, I think. It was the Thatcher era, high unemployment. I was brought up in a coal town, and my lineage is farmers and coal miners. So with that, and being 16 years of age and no qualifications, and my first experience is actually signing up for unemployment, then to end up in my mid-30s, in the situation I was in, and that also gave me the opportunity to live and work in many different parts of the world, is something that drives me in terms of part of the proposition of what I'm bringing to the market is education related, but it's not a system or an assessment tool that's about how clever somebody is in terms of qualifications. Everybody, every child, every teenager in North Carolina, irrespective of whether they go to qualify from high school or from college, have got unique strengths. And if they understand what those are, then they can have incredible work lives and incredible journeys. And that's kind of part of what it drives me from my own personal experience. I hope that kind of makes sense.
Either. So, from the perspective of coming from India, actually, as I said, like I grew up in a village, and that village had one high school. My dad was the principal, and my elementary education was done at a school where my uncle was the principal. So,
Never got a break.
never got a break, you know. But actually, that was okay. So the point here is that education was, I think, like I was given a pretty big prominence in my bringing up, and I feel that the way I look at it is that like education is a great equalizer, and in the sense that like it can open up doors for you. And I think in this country, like a lot of the value that people put in others is the skills that they bring in, no matter what their background is or where they were. Or that is not so much of a given of it. They don't look at that. What they look at is like, what does this person bring to the table, and that kind of like really depends on your background in the sense that like how you have grown yourself, how you have developed yourself, how you have acquired certain skills that can be valuable to others. And I think from that perspective, I always feel that it is much more easy for someone to acquire skills and change themselves in some ways, and still now I can just say that I just recently finished my MBA, and just last year, and now actually I'll be getting commencement this weekend. And I have another classmate in my class who is 53, 54-year-old, and she's already a CEO of a company. And even irrespective of that, and she has had a couple of companies that she had started and sold, and now she's on her third company or so, and she's still wanted to come to the MBA class, and at a good place like Duke. And so it's the kind of value that this country puts on the education and developing yourself, and that the growth or the development doesn't stop. I think those are the kind of values I feel I can associate myself with here, and I think that's what kind of makes me feel in some ways at home.
when we say international entrepreneur, I look at it at two different ways. One is somebody who is not from this country, who has come over here and is an entrepreneur. And the other way to look at it is somebody who does business internationally. So I'm in a position where I do both. So I've never worked in, don't tell this to my clients, but I've never worked in India. I have worked, all my career has been here. Yeah, all my career has been here in the USA. But I have lived half of my life in India at this point and half here. But that doesn't stop me from understanding the work culture. I have a team in India, I have a team in Philippines. I have never visited Philippines. I want to, but I have never. But still, just coming from an Asian country, it helps me understand the culture of my team and know where somebody is coming from. And that helps me because I look at myself as a bridge between my clients who, maybe somebody sitting in a city in Midwest and talking to me about their next dream, and me trying to translate that to somebody in Philippines, and the Philippines person is working with somebody in India. And in all of this, I think that I'm the bridge because both sides tend to trust me that I'm giving the right information to everybody. I don't do a great job all the time, but my unique background has helped me in that direction, that I can understand what an American client is expecting and where the gap is when the team is doing something else. And that was one of the very first lessons I got right in the first 6 months when I started the company, that perception is everything. And if you are Asian, East Asian, India, and people coming from that country tend to, when there is a problem, they tend to get in their silo and try to solve that, and try not to communicate with anybody in the world. Intentions are great, but the client sitting over here doesn't know what is going on. And my upbringing helped me with that, in the sense that I knew that no matter what, even if there is bad news to be delivered, we need to do it right away. We cannot wait because it gets worse. So I was able to do that for my business just because of this. I had the advantage that half of my life was spent in a culture that was quite different from here, and fortunately I was working with people from that culture. I don't know if I answered the question.
Perfect.
Okay.
That's great. Absolutely. I think the ability to bridge cultures is extremely powerful, particularly in a global economy. And cultural sensitivities is always a delicate issue. So I just have a quick poll. So how many folks here in the room know what's the motto of North Carolina? Just show of hands. The motto. All right. Good. So the motto of the state is esse quam videri, which means to be rather than to seem. And to me, that's the most excellent motto of all the states in US, and I think it fits our state very much. We are, I believe, very much understated in terms of our capabilities, in terms of our talents, in terms of our potential. There is pluses and minuses to that. Pluses is that it hits your heart. It makes you feel comfortable and good about the community. But there are downsides to that as well. Perception is everything. And so for a state that is growing and it's evolving fast, this understated sort of position might sometimes constrain business in terms of funding, in terms of growth, in terms of speed, and so on. So I'm trying to bring now the conversation much closer to home in a much smaller context, our context. And I'm curious to know your experience in terms of working in North Carolina, starting the business in North Carolina, and growing the business in North Carolina. What are positive things? What are maybe things that can be improved?
So I have the kind of like the exposure from California, and so certainly I can speak to that. From what I have seen, of course, I think everybody says that it's much easier to raise funds in California, and that's actually true. Luckily, in this venture, I'm not raising funds yet, and but I have had other colleagues here who are in, let's say, in payments technology business, in financial technology, that typically you would associate with either San Francisco or New York or some other places. And so it becomes very, very difficult for VCs, especially like if you go to Palo Alto, to trust that you can really develop quality software sitting in RTP. Which again, I mean, we all will say that that's not true. I mean, we definitely can be as good. Open source technologies have been here, I think started from a lot of things, including let's say if you want to talk about agile or a lot of software development things used to start from RTP as well, and but somehow that it's still you get a second citizen treatment in some ways for that. As far as I think starting business and what I'm seeing right now, even now, is that typically sales cycles are a little bit more longer here, and again many times I took a civilization and culture and leadership course in my MBA class, and we always talk about how Asian societies are more relational. You have to develop relations first, and that may take a long time. But once you have that relationship, things start flowing. But which is really not the case in US. You can really meet somebody and get quick with your presentations and do value proposition, and then most likely there will be some next step after that. But I think even then we had gone over how different locations within US are different. I mean, it's not one and same thing. And certainly, I think in the South, it's a lot more relational than, let's say, if you go to California. And so from that perspective, yes, you have to spend time with people. And typically what I've seen is that the sales cycles are much, much longer than in California.
I would disagree a little bit with you, Sudhir. So,
Okay.
I have no experience with raising funds, or I don't intend to do that either. So that part apart, I think North Carolina is a great place to start your business, especially if, for someone like me, if I'm doing a global kind of a company, and it doesn't matter for me where my client is or where my team is. It's actually a lot cheaper to offer our services compared to what somebody in California would offer. And that's an advantage. So, and I have earned a lot of business by just that, because I can, the people in California probably might hire the same programmer that I'm hiring, but they are charging higher because to support their lifestyle or, yeah, exactly, cost of living, not lifestyle, cost of living. But that's an advantage. And then the other advantage I've seen is with so many great schools around us, hiring is always much easier in this area. If you need, and not just hiring, because I've seen that most of the graduates from all big three universities that we have here tend to stay here, and they tend to start something of their own, and they're all my clients, so I'm not complaining at all. So that's true. And then the other thing that yes, the sales cycle is much smaller, but on a lighter vein, we have much less traffic too, so we can visit the client as many times as we can. So, so that's where I differ with you. But I think overall, I wouldn't do this any other place. It's great to start it here. It's a nice place where you can raise your family too. So if you're thinking long term, the whole intention of starting a business is so you can spend more time with family. Sometimes you don't want to do that, but most of the times you want to do that. So, and this is a great place to do that. So I would say that I don't not just regret, but I strongly approve of the decision that I made to have my company over here.
Thank you. I think in general terms I would concur. I'm not going to disagree. Okay? So a couple of thoughts from me. As a sort of relative, call me for want of a better expression, outsider, relatively new into the States, I'm struck with the fact that I probably meet as many Americans from other parts of America as I do Americans who are born and bred in this state, for whom North Carolina is their mother state. So my sort of perception is that this is a relatively, you may be surprised by this expression, cosmopolitan, in the sense of that there's an awful lot of mix here. And I guess that's the nature of certainly the triangle and the success and how it's attracting people from other parts of the state. So that's one observation from me. The second one is that, and something I would concur with one of my colleagues, it's very relationally based in terms of how to go about doing business and building relationships and building trust. And that's in my comfort zone because I benefited from living and working in parts of the world where relations were really, really, really important and come first and foremost before business. And the context I'll give to that as an insight for me is, I think, and I was reflecting on this earlier today, ready for tonight, I think if I'd spent the last 2.5 decades still in the UK, first of all, my accent wouldn't have changed. A lot of people think I'm from South Africa or Australia for some reason, because kind of my accent's changed. But I think if I got on a plane a year ago from the UK and come here, the lens through which I look would be very different. The Brits, by definition, similar to some other Europeans, certainly the Germans, would very down to business. Let's get the business done, and it's less relational. So that possibly could have been a speed bump or a somewhat of a challenge for me. But I've spent 2 decades living and working in places, as I say, where relationships are really, really important, and that's stood me in, I think, good stead so far in terms of how to go about doing business.
Yes, accent is a really interesting thing. I'm still trying to pass as North Carolinian, and people don't believe me. So, to a certain extent, we all love all the things that enable us to pursue our dreams, to build, all these companies that we started. At a certain point in time, obviously, comes the whole idea of tying into the community closer, giving back to the community. We all have a contribution to this community that we made home. Sometime back, I was talking with a entrepreneur here in the Triangle area, and he was mentioning that he was part of the Lebanese community, and one of the things that they were trying to do is they were trying to show back, to everybody else what the Lebanese community brings to the Triangle, the businesses they are starting, the employment that they are creating, and so on and so forth. Just in this idea that there is more to this than just a history. There is more to this than just being here and making a fortune or not. So what's your perspective? Of course, different companies at different stages. What's your perspective about giving back, about engaging in the community?
Go first, okay.
Now we can see which questions are hard.
I think at the stage where our company is now, past its tenure, definitely the term legacy keeps coming up, and we are. I personally, I have a very strong belief that education is what makes a difference, especially for Asian countries or third world countries. And the difference between anybody down there who's trying hard to make his living versus me is just my parents were able to afford the education for me, and they could send me over here for bigger opportunities. So we have already, as a company, started the initiative where we want to help our people, and not necessarily in just those particular countries, but I'm more soft to India and Philippines, obviously, but there are other countries in the world too. But yeah, from legacy point of view, that's one thing that we are looking at, and there are a lot of good organizations both in India and Philippines that help out, where you can just for $1 a day you can sponsor a whole school. I'm not talking a kid, a whole school. So that makes a huge difference once you are looking at some organizations like that. Secondly, we are very much partial to North Carolina, as you heard on my earlier answer. So we give preference to people when we are hiring interns or such, preference to people who are here. First I get to meet them, which is nice. Because all this year, to give a little bit of history, though we are a 10-year-old company, my company was 2-people company till 3 years back. me and one other person in Philippines, both of us managing the show somehow. And then I had this moment where I thought, okay, I need to grow from here. This is just not the right thing to do. So from there we have grown about 12 times, no, 6-7 times now. And in the process, I have learned more and more about how people work in the Philippines, how people work in India, and how people work here. So again, education, so internships are always a welcome thing in our company. We started, we didn't succeed too much last year because that's when we started it, but this year we are definitely looking at all 2 big schools and even the other schools. And that's kind of our way to give back, and that benefits the company too, so it's a win-win. That's where we're taking it from now. But there are a few other things. Till this point, we were more or less trying to get to the point where we wanted to be, but I think now is the point where we want to start thinking about the legacy.
We're at a sort of still at a startup stage, so I haven't sort of started a program of how I foresee us contributing to the community here, but it's something that's a part of the attraction of being self-employed. It gives flexibility to invest time as and when I want to. So as an example of what I have done in previous countries I've lived in is, and this is again is part of what I like to do generally. So the things that I've been blessed to be skillful at, I like to try and apply them. So I was involved in setting up and running a. Is that time up? We finished.
Says we have to stay here and listen to you.
I was involved in setting up a program of visiting prison inmates and helping them and prepare them for those that were approaching the end of their jail terms, in terms of helping them prepare for engaging back and integrating back into society, and in particular helping them on things like preparing for the workplace, helping them establish and coaching them in terms of finding jobs. Unemployment and financial pressures is one of the single biggest drivers to repeat offenders. So that's the way I was trying to give some of my time and talents. My wife and I also, she's a partner in the business. We're involved in a program helping distressed expats. That's a nice way of saying Brits and Americans who've made certain mistakes, maybe in a country where the laws of that land looked at what they were doing in a not too helpful light, and they needed some help and assistance to get themselves out of spots of trouble. So those are the kind of ways that we try and give back. And the prison program is something I'm actually actively researching now and trying to make connections to see how I can get involved in similar programs like that here in North Carolina.
So from my point of view, on a personal level, what I like about AITP also, now that I'm getting to know, is that previously when I was here in RTP, I was involved with RTP Java Users Group a lot. I was a board member, and now even in California there's another really good organization, and that's actually kind of a taproot. So they actually help other non-profit organizations. And the way, on a personal level, what you can do is being in IT, being in project management, you know how to run projects, you know how to let's say put plans together, and so you help the NGOs put those things they're either if you're a CFA, you could put their financials together. You could help them. If you're a marketing person, you could do that. So those are the kind of things that someone could get associated with that, and those kind of things that on a personal level that I had done at Taproot from project management. I think, but here since I started the machine learning company here with my 2 other partners, one of them, Neil, here in Greensboro, he's very much into connecting with universities, and we have been actually trying to get in touch with NC State. NC State has a really good program to kind of like get companies to interact with and the students and do projects or get them into the internship programs as you mentioned. And same thing for UNC Charlotte and UNC Greensboro. So those kind of like the universities that we have been talking to. And so that I think again, A, like it helps the students, and B, it helps like it kind of becomes a pipeline for yourself. And so I think it's kind of a win-win situation. And so I believe that like and again in California I was not really involved into universities, and so I don't know. But here, especially, I think you got really good associations that actually are like kind of these universities are running programs to help. And so I think that's a good thing to get in, like engaged with.
Right, so that's a bit of a good segue into my next question, which is about mentorship and about advice for entrepreneurs. So the question has two parts. What would be the general advice for entrepreneurs? Your general advice for entrepreneurs? And then what would be your general advice for an international entrepreneur?
Sure, certainly. So, I mean, I have had, I would say, a couple of stints at entrepreneurship. As I mentioned, like I had a company for 2-3 years, and that had to stop for whatever reason. That okay. Another short stint I had was in California, and now I'm starting again here. Basically, I think what I learned was that there are certain skills that like you may or may not have, and I think you have to kind of like understand what your strengths and what your weaknesses are, play to your strength, and partner with others who can kind of like complement you. So in this particular time, what I have done is that I have partnered with 2 other people. One is local person here who has really good connections and who has really built his own company, and he has a marketing background. So he's like he would be the chief growth officer, and the other person that other partner of mine, he is chief operating officer, and he also has good connections in India. But more on top of it, like he has had an Inc. 500 company. He built like another derivatives software company in India. So he has really good organizational strength, and so you basically bring people together because you're not going to do anything on your own, and like that would not work. And at some point you need to build your team together. And so that's from my personal point of view. I would say that like my lessons learned, and so that's like I would say. Oh, from international perspective, yes. Okay, sorry about that. So from international perspective, I think the good thing is that I have worked in like let's say other India, as well as I have had clients in UK, Canada, not too far, but yes. And I would say that like I think different countries or different cultures the people bring their own backgrounds into. And it's usually like the diversity is helpful in the sense that like you have to understand people are different, and like you have to again play to their strengths. So sometimes like people would be like if they are from relational areas, like they would help you with that. If they're like more some people are just quite direct, and so like maybe they are really good in terms of like when you're trying to brainstorm, or if you're trying to understand like how to get get new ideas, that kind of like would help. And so you really have to like kind of build those, bring those ideas or bring that diversity together.
So advice is a little strong word, I think. It's hard for me to give advice to entrepreneurs, but here's what I will tell the younger me. If I was starting my company 10 years back, and that day was today, and I'm meeting me who is sitting here today. So what I would tell is, your company is only as good as your team is. And so from day one, start building your team. And as Jim Collins has, to paraphrase him, if you look at a company like a bus, you just get the people and make them sit in the right positions and let them take the bus. And it's great because then you are sitting at the back bench and just relaxing, you know. So that should have been my philosophy, but I did not get that for the first 6 or 7 years of my business life, and then it struck me. But that's one advice I would give. The second is, it's very important, even if you have a great team with you, make sure you have a great process that goes with it. Because otherwise the team is, again, they're going to try and take the bus somewhere, but you need to tell them where and how you want it done, where your end goal is. Otherwise, it's going to take you all over the place. Some other softer advices is take care of your health, because you're going to work a lot of hours, initially at least, so make sure that you take care of yourself. Have time enough for all the near and dear ones in your life. Could be your friends, could be your family, because they are the ones who are going to be calming you down when that one night you wake up and you don't know where your next client is coming from. So make sure you spend time with them. And from international point of view, I would say that no matter where you are, how many years you've been to a place, still people kind of recognize you from where you are. So take that responsibility seriously, and whenever, from my instance, I have 2 roles to fulfill. One is that I'm an Indian entrepreneur. So if I do something that's not what's not supposed to be done, people will remember it as an Indian entrepreneur did something. And I take that responsibility very seriously. And on the other side, when I'm dealing with my team, they look at me like an American entrepreneur. So I take that responsibility seriously too, because I don't want them to think that I behave a certain way because I'm an American, because they're going to remember that too. So that's important, that take your responsibility as where you come from seriously and do the right thing.
The people aspect, the team aspect that my colleagues have spoken about, I absolutely concur with. So rather than sort of repeat the same sort of advice, one other really important advice I would give certainly to early stage startups is, I use the expression, maintain structure. Be structured in what you do. And if there was a young entrepreneur or somebody here with an early stage business now, I think the easiest way to give advice is to go down to the nearest bookshop and buy a book called Traction. Has anybody ever heard of that? I can't quite remember the author's name. Thank you, Gino Wickman. A fellow entrepreneur here in the Triangle actually gave me the book, gifted me the book in January. I've read it twice since then. And I'll probably read it at least twice more over the rest of this year. It's wonderfully simple, which is what I like about it, but a common mistake, I think, for certainly early stage entrepreneurs, and certainly if you're stepping out of the corporate world where you're conditioned to certain ways of doing things, you have a structured environment, and all of a sudden you're setting up a business from scratch, you've got a blank piece of paper, it's very easy to fall into bad habits, lose that structure. So when I say structure, you know, how are you spending your time on a weekly basis? What are the key milestones that are things you're doing in a week, in a month, in a quarter? Because you may have a business plan on the 1st of January, but before you know it, it can be the 31st of December and you're thinking, what happened to this year? So the book talks about, and it doesn't use the term structure, it's just my own term of the concept, is the times, my advice is make sure you give yourself time instead of working in the business so that you're working on the business. So that's the ability to take time out, quality time to see where you're going, are you on strategy, what's working, what's not working. And one thing I love about small business environments is there's an opportunity to learn every single day. So if I can offer a second piece of advice, I always say is, what are you learning every day? Because if you're a young business, you've got scope of opportunity, you've got flexibility to move with the market, to move with opportunities. But you only really capture those if you ask yourself that question each day of yourself and of your team in terms of what are we learning. I used to have a situation with the business development team of my business in the Middle East where somebody might walk into my office disappointed because a proposal that he was convinced we were going to secure at the last minute we didn't get it, it went to a competitor. And my first and immediate question is always, okay, what can we learn about this? What could we have done differently? What didn't we do that might have made the difference? So that's another nugget of past experience and advice. The international piece, I'd like to sort of narrow this down into something very, very specific. By definition, if somebody is international or seeking to go international, in a lot of situations, that requires finding partners around the world, local partners, JV partners, people who understand those markets better than we do, that offer you that presence and that footprint. What's great about the age we live in is that you can find those partners very easily in this day and age. We've got LinkedIn, we've got the internet, you can actually go out there and you can find people to scale and get reach. And I also find people can come and find you. And I've had many instances of people approaching me, finding me on LinkedIn, saying, I like what you do you license your brands, can I take your brand? And I got really excited very early on in the start of our business in Dubai when somebody in South Africa wanted to license exactly what we did, put it in a box as it were, and said, let me do this. And we engaged and invested in some discussions and trips down to South Africa, and it didn't work out. And my learning from that is, and if you are international or going international, map out what your ideal partner is and then recruit against that. Don't just look for people who are maybe kind of experienced or somebody who approaches you. I now have a clear template in my mind. If I wanted to take my business to Australia, what would be the ideal partner? It's like recruiting an individual. If they don't meet the criteria, then the red light, you've got the milestones in the relationship building where you can quickly identify, is this a worthy partner or not? So that's my sort of advice from an international growth perspective.
Right, well, those were my questions, prepared questions, and so I wanted to see if the audience has any questions for the panel.
I have one.
Is it that late?
I got a question.
Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Sudhir, I didn't hear exactly what your business was.
I'm in a machine learning startup. So we actually are helping develop models or like artificial intelligence and machine learning solutions for mid-sized businesses, specifically into retail and financial technology. So some banks or financial institutions. And so what we are trying to do is we're trying to in retail, you have, I think somebody was mentioning supply chain here, supply chain optimization, or intelligent inventory allocation between different stores. That basically ties into your demand forecasting models. So you develop those. Right now, we are working with clients, and the way what we are trying to do is we're trying to give them a lot cheaper solutions in the way that we can keep the IP and then make it productized with that. So that's why I was saying that right now we're not looking for funding, but once we start getting into that productization phase, then at that time it will be a different ballgame.
Thank you.
So Sudhir and I actually spoke about this when we were kind of going through the line there, but being an entrepreneur and starting off your business, it's not always easy in terms of finding the cash to do that. So Sudhir and I, as I mentioned, spoke about it, but I'm interested if any one of you have been able to find funding, for startups here in North Carolina, and if you have, can you share your experience with that?
It looks like nobody in the panel was even looking for money just
So
yet.
everybody's financially wealthy.
A couple of weeks back, they had a nice presentation at the Million Cups. I don't know if you attended. It's at the Frontier, typically on every Wednesday. There was, I'm trying to jog my memory what his name was, but he had a similar model where he was having venture capital, not venture, but some kind of capitalist who want to fund smaller and micro companies. So, and that's specific to North Carolina, so that might be one
I-
for you?
I brought the point up because I was at a legislative outlook meeting yesterday, and they were specifically talking about money available for startups. So my curiosity, it piqued my curiosity, especially tying this in with this discussion today. So, you know, it's an area I think that everyone should probably be looking at.
Well, I think, so I just give a little bit of my perspective because I dabbled a little bit into that. So number one, I was told multiple times to go to the Valley if I want to raise money, period. Things have changed in the meantime. I think they are getting better. We just had a $20 million fund that was raised by the co-founders. Angel investors are still here, the best source of bootstrap or getting things started. But one of the challenges, I believe, with the local angel investors, most of the local angel investors, and there is money in the triangle, don't get me wrong, there is money in the triangle. But it's very traditional money. They do not understand SaaS, they do not understand you know, that type of cycle in terms of going to getting to profitability, scale, and so on. So that's why there is a lot of room here for education and a lot of room for success stories. The more success stories we have in various sectors, I think the easier it's going to be to dislodge some of that fund, or some of those funds to come to more aggressive, modern, if you would, maybe, or more you know, leveraged investments. The other thing that I would say is we had a similar conversation maybe 3 years ago or 4 years ago about what's lacking on the funding side in the state. The topics were the same, the points were the same. There's a little bit of angel, some venture coming in, but it's difficult, and it will be great if the state will support even more and will kind of facilitate. I don't think much has happened. I mean, I'm you know, open to be corrected. But I think we need to move past conversation. I kind of give up on that conversation, thinking that we need to make success stories, we need to educate, and that will help you know, open up the funding. And just one last point, there was a presentation a couple of months back, was a kind of a reverse pitch where VCs and funding groups came to do. It was a very good event, and those are the typical opportunities where you will see how funding trickles into the track. And you will see there on that list, you will see the angels, a few angels that invest a little bit of money in getting things started. You have a few venture capital groups that kind of dabble in a few verticals. And then you see this other pretty big sector of companies that will invest in you if you're $1 million, $2 million, $5 million revenue. We get calls like that every other day. So if you're there, fantastic.
Okay.
That's some really good points that you've made, and that's one observation certainly of the triangle is that it's not as active. I've also heard the same things in terms of if you want investment and solid capital, go to the Valley. I think it's something that probably needs to change. And I've had more access to venture capital in other markets, far more easy access if I required it, than I suspect is available here now. So I think it's one thing that would be a good change. And if it's going to be driven at the state level, that would be really, really good.
I think the forecast is that things will open up, that it's going to get better. That's at least what I derived from the conversation yesterday.
Yes, go for it. Well, okay. I was just going to add that, like, I think from, again, talking to one or two of my partners, like, I think what we have heard is that, like, there are some private equity companies here, especially in Charlotte, that I hear, that are interested in turnaround kind of situations, but not so much into, like, you know, the technology startups. So technology startups, I think back in 2001 timeframe, I was pretty involved in CED, and I'm sure like CED has a lot of events, or like there is they used to have a VC conference once a year. I'm sure that probably still going on. I don't know. I'm not that tuned to it now. And of course, I think I know at least some angel investors here, like I think Craig Stone of Higher Networks.
But then the backing that you get with that is very powerful in the sense of opening doors for you as a startup, and then helping you to really make something out of that investment. And so I think if we talk legislature and we talk about the state being involved or other people, sort of the community being involved, it would be great if we can get more of the folks who were very successful, like ShareFile and so on in the triangle, to actually get more and more involved. I think they are to a certain extent because they accumulate the weight, but get more involved and be incentivized to help the startups that way. Any other questions, Michael?
So I'm always curious from an entrepreneurial point of view, not necessarily from a global entrepreneurial point of view, but how do you go about, so your startups, how do you go about finding your customers? How much networking do you have to do to find a customer?
Again, I can probably just speak a little bit because we are really in that kind of mode right now. I think in our case, especially kind of, as I said, partnering with somebody local here who knows this area very well, who has connections into other retail or other customers, or again some of the private equity will also guide you towards the customers. So it just depends on how you choose your target market and who your target is, and I think based on that, you will have to kind of devise that. In our case, we decided on okay, we would go with the existing known entities first, and then based on that, then you diversify, and then you start looking at similar other organizations and companies. And so it's still like a kind of a two-step approach, I would say, that we are doing.
For us, I think one of our strongest network has been our clients. So we get a lot of referrals from our clients, and we actively ask for it. Not a lot of people do that. Talking with more and more business owners, I have seen that people are very shy for some reason to ask for referrals. We very actively ask for it. We ask for it every other month, and that has worked well. So that has taken us this far, and then we are hiring some good business development people who help us out with that too. So they have their own networks, and that helps.
I think for my particular situation, we've been investing time in understanding the market to get really focused on understanding who our target market is from a customer point of view. So for background, the product that we're bringing to market has application in education, it has application for corporates for recruitment, for corporates for talent management, talent development. I've wanted to go through, and have been going through, a very disciplined approach. What's helped me from an education point of view is the quality of networking that you can do here. So I've learned an awful lot about the market here for the US as a whole, not just for North Carolina. And I'm at the stage now where I've literally fine-tuned down to my approach to this, and my advice to entrepreneurs is get very laser focused on who your clients are, who your targets are. And I've got 20 targets for the whole of the United States, and that's it for the next 12 months, I hope. And we're just at the stage of starting to engage.
So thank you very much. Big round of applause. We have got some sweet speaker gifts for you guys. Thank you, Robert, for creating these. They are some awesome coins that we got. Show them all to you guys. Robert, can you see that? Can you zoom in that far? You want to walk towards you?
I totally can.
Okay, brilliant, brilliant. So we've got one for each one of the speakers. Thank you very kindly, sir. Swanand, pleasure. I feel like a commencement speech. Thank you, sir. Thank you, and thank you very much for moderating. Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming.